Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to my dark room. I love the colour of these walls. Given the government's recent instructions or directive about explicit teaching and the role that that's going to play in public education in New South Wales, I thought it would be a useful opportunity for me to talk about the way in which we both teach sentence writing explicitly, but also the way in which we fuse that with building structured responses overall and take you through that process. Because I've just been working with some year eights, amazing bunch of kids, and the results, it's been very clinical and the results have been fantastic. So I just thought, wow, other people should do that. That's fantastic. So here we go. So explicit approach to teaching and student responses. Let's go. What we're going to talk about is that step-by-step process that ideally we use here. So in this case, we're going to be talking about poetry. So it's talking about introducing the poem. It's talking about, which includes that presentation, context, engagement. It answers that question, why, which is a critical question for the kids. Why are we studying this? Why is this relevant to me? What do I gain out of it? And those can be, and those conversations and those, I think, they can be complex. They're incredibly important, and they can be very, very practical. On one hand, yes, you can talk about the I guess through this poem, we're doing Banjo, Paterson's, Clancy, the Overflow, and you can talk about that connectedness to nature, all of those kinds of things. But you can also say, look, this is great practice and vocabulary because it teaches you how to, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing in the HSC, and it's good practice because there's a ton of kids out there that are somewhat less interested in the emotional philosophical journey than they are the outcome, and we have to meet both of those needs. That's a duty that's incumbent upon all of us as teachers. And I think there's a balance sometimes lost in that. Explicit teaching does very much allow for a very passionate, collective, diverse, informed response to questions around philosophy and culture and identity. But at the same time, students are able to achieve good results because they know how to write a response. So reading for understanding, annotating, we'll talk about that. Talk about how we build topic sentences together in class, how we deconstruct the rep, and what that looks like in a student's workbook, and then ultimately what putting the pieces together looks like. I just recorded this video, but I didn't do it with any sound, so that was amazing. You can't recreate art. So fortunately, if this is prosaic at best, then I apologise. So first thing, presentation, engagement, annotation. As I said, this involves utilitarian and emotional appeal. It's whatever you need to do to fish in and get their attention. Often it's nice to be a bit performative. You can do your captain, my captain, Robin Williams, Carpe Diem, jumping on the tables. And you can actually do that all the time with explicit teaching. That's one of the better things about it. It's very theatrical. It can be very, very theatrical. I think that teaching where you sit at a table and kids are writing through stuff on their own, it's not teaching, it's babysitting. It has no meaning or function or value. Anyway, so look, this is an example of us going, so we talk about it here. We have Jack Thompson. I love reading it out as well. We talk about experiences that I had in the bush and all of those kinds of things. You personalise it, whatever. And then we go through a process of annotation where we're reading for meaning and overall comprehension. You can see there that I've actually identified the techniques that we want to talk about, sibilance, personification, some of the emotive metaphors. And then we go through introducing and eliciting abstract nouns. That process of nominalisation and kids being able to use abstract nouns is so important to their conceptual expression as they mature through stage 4, 5 and 6. I also tell the boys, look, this is great practice for the HSC. You're going to be introducing vocab, and this is exactly, if you can do this, you can achieve the HSC as well, because honestly, there's not a lot different apart from the complexity of a bit of language and idea. So we go through that. I get very excited reading the poem. Jack gets excited. The boys get excited because they love his voice. Nothing like a baritone. So first thing we do is, we step back and we ask that question, what is the big question that this text is dealing with? And I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that, teachers and students alike. You know, you get people that try to argue that Shakespeare is, you know, basically a revenge tragedy, which to me is ludicrous. I mean, on one hand, yes, it's a revenge tragedy. It utilises that format, but it's not what it's about. You know, and focusing on that structural element, if you want, is quite prosaic, and you miss the enormous and significant and profound philosophical and psychological and emotional questions and the message that's explored in that text. So you stand back from this process, you know, and it's so important to look at that complication of ideas and be able to say, okay, and just be able to simplify that into a key concept. You know, I find that the most enjoyable and challenging. And I think once you do that, once you step back from a text, I've recently doing Cloud Street, and being able to stand back from the text and say, okay, basically, this is essentially in the big picture what this is about. So anyway, you can do it with the poem, short bit of text, easy. It's not a critique. It's a positive. We don't celebrate the poem because in Australian literature because it's a miserable critique of post-industrial urban lifestyle. We do it because it's a wonderful celebration of the tranquility, serenity, intimacy, warmth of the outback and its people. So it's a positive. So we go through that process here. And that topic sentence that you can see, which has been put around a box, that's put together with the class word by word. So I say, okay, first question would be, what's the poet's name? Okay, Banjo, how do we spell it? What text is it? It's a poem. What's its name? It is what? Is it a positive or negative message? What's that word we used last term, which was about emphasising, in a kind of emotional way, all the positive elements? Okay, it's romanticised. Okay, and the boys are giving me this information back. It's a celebration, and we build that. And then we go comma. So we've got the S-I-N-G. It's juxtaposing two things. The boys are very comfortable with that. What are the two things that it clearly juxtaposes in that poem? It's the tranquility and serenity and peace of the outback with the congestion and noise or confinement. You know, and the boys, I work with the boys and basically write down on the board what they tell me to. And then we put a big, ensuring that it's okay. And we've got good word choice, and we put a box around it. And we call that 1, or we call it A. And that's really important because boys, I work at a boys' school. Sometimes we're all over the shop, and it's really important to say, put a box around that, put an asterisk around it, put fireworks around it, highlight it, because we're going to come back and we're going to use that towards the end of this week. Next thing we do is we go into, so you can see on the left there, I've done, broken that down. So, does that, doing that. You know, it's not a simplification. It's just basically how you write sentences. You know. Anyway, so go on to the next part, which is the description sentence. When we're doing, whether it's year 12, whether it's stage 4, there is a context. We call it a context sentence. So it connects the broader conceptual ideas to the actual world of the text itself. So he does this, the poet or the writer or Shakespeare does this through his representation of something. And that's almost a template, sentence phrase. You know, he demonstrates this or explores this or examines this or critiques this, whatever the case may be, through his dramatic representation, through his textual representation of boom. And then, then we start to go into the rep. But that takes that reader on that journey. And that's a very formulaic phrase that the kids just know, bang, we put that in there. As it says, formulaic, simple, descriptive, does this through the representation of something. You can change does this to be more specific if you want, but ultimately it's short, succinct, and clear. I remember a very early example I did was we were doing Tennyson, Charge of the Light Brigade, and it was looking at heroism, and I guess it was Tennyson explores this idea of heroism through his representation of the charge of the light horse in the Crimean War. So there it is, simple bit of context, what's happening, what's going on. Because not everyone's read Charge of the Light Brigade, and some people don't know what it is, and they're like, what the hell's going on? Bang, put a box around it, there's 2. So we got the first 2 sentences of our paragraph response, and then we move on into the really juicy bit that I love, which is the decon. Yeah, we call it representation. Oops, I'll go back. We call it representation, we call it rep. And really it's the most exciting part of this, and I love this. We do use the bubble method, Seldon method. People go, you're using the Seldon method. Yeah, okay, it's successful, it works, it's simple. Yeah, make fun of it. That's great. But anyway, so what we've done up here is we've got, this is in the student's book, and it replicates what's on the board. I would have actually had stock slowly stringing in the bubble, because that's what we're talking about, that bit of sibilance there. He's just written SSS. And then we've got the verb stems that I wanted to introduce to the boys. So evokes, creates a tone of, gives voice to. We wouldn't have anything else. It just gives voice to, and imagines. So they're really interested in complex and diverse ways to talk about text. You don't want kids going to the HSC and you're going shows. You're going to kill their marks. And so even if you just use this process to model verbs and how the way in which you can use verbs to talk about language, it's going to elevate the quality of their writing so much. If you think about Grand Designs, for example, the way in which he talks about space, he uses those descriptive verbs so eloquently. To talk about light and colour and space, it's beautiful. It's essentially it replicates that process. So I say to the boys, imagines, for example. Okay, so, and this is where you do your Robin Williams, Captain, my Captain, whatever. You can launch around the room. You can be very theatrical, very performative. It's great for a couple of things. One, classroom management, because the eyes are focused here. You're asking them questions. You're asking questions around the room. You're getting feedback. It's a constant, very interactive process. And, and it has a lot of energy to it. A lot of opportunities to say, ask kids who are off campus to give an answer, to contribute, or to encourage, to give positive reinforcement for guys that pop words in. So I would say, okay, so is it imagining a world of, flying cars, mobile phones, technology, AI? No. What are the common nouns, the actual literal things that they're going to see in imagining that if they envision that world? And so the boys come up with, okay, campfire is great. Okay, vast open spaces, good. Broad red sunsets. They might say sunsets. Okay, what colour are they? Are they, what's another descriptive word we can use there to thrash that out? Gives voice to is beautiful. Think the way in which the text gives voice to something. If you've got a kid in year 8 using that, that's fantastic. And they get onto that very quickly, actually. I love that phrase. So it gives voice to, in this case, as I might say, the poet's feelings of what? Is it feelings of disappointment? Is it feelings of disgust, anxiety? No, there's a sense of wonder and admiration. So we start teasing that out. And it's through it's feelings of admiration for what's that word, guys, starting with R, that means kind of, it's an interesting word, that rustic. It's kind of rough, uncivilized, a bit coarse, a bit ungentrified, and they come up with that, the rustic lifestyle of the drovers. Creates a tone of, okay, we could refer to the annotations. We've also got at the top there, connotes an absence. So sometimes talking about what is absence in the text. So they end up with a whole variety of things that they can talk about, as well as, for example, evokes. It might be, okay, just fill in something else that you have to say about the text on your own. So there's an opportunity there for both introducing new verb stems, new vocab, new ways of talking about texts, and showing how you use that, but as well as giving them opportunities to sort of add their own touch to that. So, and then, because the boys are very familiar with the scaffold at this point, and this is term 2 now, I just say, okay, write the sentence out, boys. Start with one of those clauses at the front, which means you're going to start with a gerund ing, and write it out. And so all the boys go into that process. That's the box down the bottom is what the student's done on his own, based on that, what you see above that. So it's giving voice to the poet's feelings of admiration for the rustic lifestyle of the outback. The poet's use of sibilants, describing the stock slowly streaming, imagines the world of campfires and spaces and broad red sunsets, creating a tone of tranquility, connoting an absence, haste and duress. Lovely. I mean, we can talk about maybe what's better at the end, the order, but, that's a pretty solid effort. And you'll go around and we'll listen to a number of kids and go into that process. And then at the end, as it says there, they box it. Because that's the next sentence they're going to be using in their paragraph. So put a box around that, call that number 3. And then we go on to the next one. What's really interesting about the next part is that's a page of another student's book. You'll see here that there's 2 things which I'd really like to point out. One of them is he doesn't use copy the layout on the board with the bubble and the arrows. He does dot points. So you've got the emotive metaphor. He's got operating, is suggesting, lesson ended, and then start again, implying, celebrates. So rather than doing the arrows, he's just got dot points. Science teachers love it because they just do tables. Sure, it's a generalization, but it is what it is. That's what a generalization is. So you can lay it out whatever way works for you as a classroom teacher, as a student. I like the chaos of the kind of like the mad scientists with everything going across the board. Speculative, chaotic, love that. Kind of feeds into my bit of ADHD. But, you can be more linear if you wish. At the top there, we've introduced, as it says here, because we're adding a bit of rep to this, we want to introduce the concept of flow, continuity, segues. So it says there, when working through the next rep, we often use this is reinforced by, simultaneously, or linking sentences. And we have a linking sentence at the top there. So it's Paterson creates a dramatic climax, so his representation of the glory of the everlasting stars. Beautiful sentence. Sounds so nice when you say it. So here, again, it's not just, okay, write this down, put a box around and copy it. The process is, okay, what's the poet? He's, what's that, he's creating what's that word for a peak, when it's like the critical moment. Some of them throw apotheosis at me again, but we're going to use that later. And I was like, okay, climax, okay. Again, it would be through his representation of what? What's he talking about here? What's the key line? Okay, it's the night sky. So you could actually say this representation of the night sky. But it's good to work the text in there because then you actually don't have to put the quote in underneath it. And anyway, so it's an example of a way in which you can use a linking sentence to go into the rep. So there's variations of the way in which you write about that. Again, he's just gone through and I introduced the word operating. Operating is a fantastic verb to use, talk about text, the way in which, because often a text has a function. I mean, a technique, invariably has a function. And in this case, that operates as an emotional apotheosis. And again, I asked the kids, okay, what is that word starting with A? We talked about earlier, which means that peak, that climax. Okay, it's an apotheosis. Is it a imaginative apotheosis? Is it a scientific apotheosis? What? And they go emotional. Great. Okay, so let's get that down. It suggests, what's the word that means to elevate? Starts with T, to go to a new level. Transcend. Thank you. And I know this because we use that language in our teaching and learning. I've introduced it before. The bell went, and we went on with implying. And it's interesting, this sentence here, implying the soul or spirit ascends to an elevated level of spirituality and consciousness through our relationship or connectedness with the universe and experience. That took about 10 minutes. And there was a lot of back and forth with myself and students about the kind of words we wanted to use. The kids threw the word ascend to me. So I was like, okay, so what is ascend? And they're saying the person, the thoughts. Okay, so not really. What are some words starting with S that maybe you can describe that process? So you elicit soul or spirit, elevated level of spirituality and consciousness. And so it's basically about having an ongoing conversation, word by word, building these sentences. Why would we use that word? What's another word we can use? So as a group, we sit around. There's 30 kids there in that class. And we sit around and say, what's a sentence that we can put together that sounds nice, that's sophisticated, that's on point, that talks about what we want to be doing? It's a very collective experience. It's very inclusive. And that wasn't the sentence that I went in with necessarily in the back of my mind. It's heading in that direction. But the wording and the word choice there has been added to and contributed to by the kids in the class. And then you've got celebrates the beauty of the stars. So, okay, it's like there is your dot points or your bubble, however you've laid it out. Put the sentence together again using operating maybe first. So there you have it. Operating as emotional apotheosis in the text. And that's the work he's done on his own, just putting those ideas together. This emotive metaphor is suggestive of transcendence, implying the soul spirit ascends, and celebrating the beauty of the stars. I'd probably put the stars right at the top there because it's more of the world of the text and simpler, and you'd probably change the consciousness or our relationship connected to the universe last because the ideas are getting bigger and broader, and that would be the feedback for that. But then again, okay, so you get a box around that, and at the end of it, we do a bit of rep like for the top half of the poem 3 times, and then they piece those boxes together. I say, okay, go back to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, everything you've labelled, and write them out in a paragraph, chunking them together. So they go, that sentence that they've done, the next sentence that they've done, the next sentence that they've done, the next, and they piece that together, and they walk away with a paragraph, and they get a sense of, okay, that's how the topic sentences work. That's that sentence that goes underneath. This is how I write about rep, and I relate it to the next bit of rep, and I create continuity. And that's how the process works. So at the end of a 4 or 5 lesson period, as we go through talking about language, and that's how long it takes, they're practicing writing. They're practicing the written response that you need to, be able to achieve in the HSC, which is, and that honestly, that's as good as almost anything that you read in the HSC. It's probably better than most. I've done a lot of HSC marking. And you can pull out a band success say from a kid who graduated 5 years ago, and you can say, look what he's done on Hamlet, and look what you've done here. It's exactly the same. There's a bit of language. You might have words like epistemological or ontological or whatever, but the structures are almost, are very, very similar. So if you can do this, you can do that. And the moment you get kids thinking, I can do this, you've conquered so much of that apprehension, that sense of separation. You have connectedness, and the boys feel empowered. The relationship with the teacher grows. And so over the course of a poetry unit, we would do this 3 or 4 times, and they would consistently practice deconstructing language, writing topic sentences about those poems, putting those together in paragraphs. And our assessment might be, recall some of that, but it also is going to be looking at just another Australian poem that they haven't looked at and write about it. Because what you can do with Australian poetry and what you can do with a lot of text is you can take the ideas in a lot of Banjo Paterson's poem and apply them to a lot of famous Australian poems. The ideas are not that complex and diverse. And so students says, I can use that language to talk about that. And in the process, that becomes active language. They memorise. And so they're applying that learned knowledge to other texts very, very effectively. And that's what happens. And it's a really satisfying process. The boys love it. I love it. And, it's a great job. And you get to jump around. And the kids go, thanks. And I love the boys. So that's it. Thanks.